Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul, Revelation Edition.
A podcast sponsored by Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League.
We're here to discuss the book of Revelation, just as if we were asking Jesus himself. I am Paul Spurlin.
And I am Les Sandifer. We hope you will enjoy our relaxed Bible-based discussions.
Thanks for joining us as we think about and talk about all those things we'd ask Jesus over a cup of coffee.
It needs a little air after it, doesn't it?
It does.
We do this
It does
every
its
time.
thing. It's like a big drum hit.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the drum hit on like rain. When you hit it and it resonates and you see the water bouncing.
You just let it ring.
It's like,
I was watching a video about a guy that plays bass, and I play bass, and he's playing it, and I'm watching him thinking, you're ridiculous, because he is really good.
Yeah.
But then he was talking about sitting on stage in this spot between the bass drum and the bass thing over here, and that's what you said made me think about that. You know, just that moment where you hear it and you hear that bass drum ring, you got to just let it go.
Oh yeah, you just let it do its thing.
Yeah,
so it's pretty cool.
So and then we jump back over here and we start talking.
That's right.
The next thing you know, we're talking about stuff.
We are talking about stuff.
This is very focused stuff.
It is.
Our other podcast is focused as well, but you know, this one's specific to a topic that's near and dear to
A book.
a lot of our hearts. It's one specific book, the
Book.
Revelation.
I know. Like it.
Not an S.
Nope. It
There's
stands
no
on its
S.
own.
It's all by itself.
It is good stuff. We do want to go ahead and, as we begin the show, thank everyone for listening as we continue this. We are in, this is episode number 5. We will be discussing the next 2 churches on the journey, the 7 churches of Asia, Smyrna and Pergamum.
Yes.
And we'll get in that in just a few minutes. But we want to thank Piedmont Road elders and church for sponsoring this good show, this venture that we're on, and this journey that we're on to get together. And we also want to thank Ministry League as well for the resources and the location where you can go and find this and other shows just like it.
I'd like to encourage folks, if you're listening to this and you find value in it, tell some other folks about it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them where to find it. I helped one of our members find the various podcasts at YouTube, which is one place to find it. Right. Or you can go to Ministry League and go to the network, drill down. Whatever you call it, you know, when you click on
Drop down box.
the network click.
All right.
And that's where the podcasts sit at the Ministry League, on the Ministry League app.
Right.
I believe you can also get to them from our website, lifeinchrist.com.
I think
Is that
so.
correct?
Yeah.
I haven't done it from that forum, so
Yeah, because we have our own podcast page on the church website.
Church website. So.
Yeah, lifeinchrist.com. And all things Piedmont Road. Go there and check it out.
And if you have
Nice
feedback on this podcast or others, coffeeconvo@lifeinchrist.com, email address, or text us, you know, Paul or Les, you know, whichever one of us you want to send a ping to. But that'll keep us, you know, kind of on task if you got comments or thoughts or feedback about, you know, what we're doing, where we're headed, that sort of thing. Like Paul said, we've done several lessons here. We are now to the point where we're going to talk about the church in Smyrna and the church in Pergamum. So these will be churches 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
If you've kind of in tune with what we've been talking about, these are on the kind of a trade route journey. So you had Ephesus first.
Right.
And then they would move up the coast to Smyrna and a little farther up to get to Pergamum, but not coastal.
Yeah, look up
a little more inland.
Look up the map there. As you said, it is right there on the beach, off the water. You got a line here and then a line there, and it brings all 7 together. Just look at it. We did that for our folks here at Piedmont Road a few Wednesdays ago, to kind of give them a visual of where we're talking about, and some are hundreds of miles apart. So
yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the visual of the churches in the circle as we put it up on the screen. One of the things that particular map showed, and I thought was interesting, if we can try to get a visual around this, this is what's now modern day Turkey. So it's Asia Minor, but there were a lot of other churches that we know the names of that are in that general area.
Yeah.
They're not one of the 7 listed here, but they are there. Colossae being among them. So there's some other churches in the area.
Atala. Just kidding.
I don't.
It looks like Atala.
I've got it. Yeah, at some point I got to figure out why that seems so familiar to me from a Bible perspective. But anyway, part of the concept being that those 7 churches were the key churches as listed in Revelation, but would lend itself to how easily it would have been dispersed to other areas other churches in the area, Phrygia or Pamphylia, those regions.
Yeah.
Where some of those are Iconium, Derbe, Lystra. I'm just thinking of some of those that Paul referenced on his missionary journeys.
Right.
Colossae. So anyway, just interesting. They're all kind of in the same area with these 7 churches.
For sure.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. So we're about to jump in and do some reading, but before we do, keep in mind we're talking about Pergamum. I think that's what we're starting at.
Smyrna.
Smyrna?
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? We're starting with Smyrna, and then we'll be at Pergamum, which is also known as Pergamus.
Yes.
And so we'll get into that in just the compromising church. But we'll start here with verse 8, if you'll follow along with us in chapter 2 of Revelation. And the angel of the Lord, the angel of the church, actually, in Smyrna, write, "These things says the first and the last." Man, I love how he uses that so many times.
Oh, yeah.
He revisits to make sure you understand. Who was dead and came to life. I know your works. He enters. I love how he enters this every time because this is Jesus. And this is what I told you before. I may say something I'll read, but this is Jesus saying, "I know you are. This is where we are." And so that's the way it is for every church. He knows
I know who
they
you
are.
are.
Exactly.
Yep.
Tribulation and poverty, but you are rich.
Yep.
And you're going to make a good point about that in a little while.
Yep.
And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not. Sounds like a similar problem in Ephesus if you think about it.
Yep.
But are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of these things which you are about to suffer. In which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, and you may be tested, and you will have tribulation in 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you that crown of life. That verse, that passage, especially that last phrase, last sentence, preachers, teachers, everybody uses so very often, but they should, because that's so important. We'll get back to that in a minute. He who has an ear, let him hear, as the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. That is the church of Smyrna.
Yeah. Pretty
so
powerful
much there.
stuff.
Yeah, so much there to unpack.
Well, and the church at Smyrna, like the church of Philadelphia, the only 2 of the 7 that didn't have any condemnation.
Right.
They had commendations, but not condemnations. I have to stop and think about those words to
that's cool. Yeah.
say them correctly. Yeah, and there's a lot to be covered in here. One of the most interesting pieces of this to me is when we talk about be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. That phrasing of be faithful unto death really has a literal meaning, be faithful even if the result is your death.
Right.
So it to me, it bears just a slightly different feel when you think about you may be put in a situation where the result of your faithfulness is that you die for it. That's not something we feel a lot in our lives, is it?
No.
I mean, we just don't have that experience.
Right.
When we're talking about, I mean, we look at this church, and this church is in a place where the Roman Empire is weighing heavily down on them.
Well, tribulation is the mainstay.
That's right.
there. And for us, it is as well. But the devil is a lot more subtle with us today than what occurred in the first century.
Especially for
Or it seems as though.
where these people were living.
Exactly.
Now, I think about our brethren over in India. It may be they may feel more like. So this, sorry, my man immediately jumped off to something that you and I have talked about before, and that is this concept that we relate to these experiences kind of on a personal level. That's what we do. And these 7 churches represent the church kind of as a whole. it doesn't. We can't think of these as one-off situations for each of them. We have to look at them as the whole.
Right.
So if you look at this particular church and you think about what some of our brethren in India may be facing, this may speak to them more than it does to us. Mm-hmm. It's kind of where I was going with that thought.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Their tribulation may mirror this tribulation.
That's true.
Which is exactly the point of why we have 7 churches, because our situation, we're going to get into the idea that Laodicea is the church that was rich but poor, because they were rich in this life but poor in spiritual, right?
For sure.
Maybe we're going to find that sometimes in our lives we're Laodicea, and not the other side of this,
that's
right?
True. Yeah, unfortunately.
So anyway, jumping ahead to
you're good.
We don't want to get all the way to Laodicea at this point in our lives.
Yet.
Not yet, but anyway, you're right. Their stuff here is about tribulation.
I mean, he literally says that.
And he goes on to talk about their poverty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the backstory with that particular word is that it means destitute.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Again, something, Paul, I'm not sure you and I have a true relationship to like they did back then, being destitute.
Right. No. Thank goodness.
We probably have some poverty.
I mean.
But even in this country, we don't, with the exception of a very small percentage, people are not subjected to true poverty in the sense that they have no other recourse.
Right.
I mean, because we have a lot of ways to help people. Some may not take advantage of it.
Can you imagine that existence, though?
No.
That is so sad.
I cannot.
And I just thank God for the blessings of our life, our lives, to so that we don't, to give us the talents to be able to give back to Him and live for Him and to be blessed.
And in a country that really allows us,
right.
That opportunity. Again, we look at other parts of the world.
Yeah.
They may not have
they don't have
that same opportunity.
Yeah, that's true.
But these folks were subjected to a government that would take their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had the legal right to do it. I mean,
Right.
that was just the way the world worked for the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm. And they loved Rome. They were loyal to it.
Yeah, that's one of the tricky parts about the area area in which they lived. And I think I'm trying to remember if we talked about this with Ephesus, same, but it's more acute here because apparently there was a Jewish population in the Smyrna area that really sucked up to the Roman Empire, if you will.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
And that's really what they were trying to do. And what's the easiest way to do that? You throw the Christians under the bus. Because they're the target.
Right. For sure.
Let's deal with them. So. Yeah, so as we move through some of this, it's some of the phrasing just kills me because it talks about the Jews that aren't really Jews.
Right.
And he calls them a synagogue of Satan. That's kind of a sad commentary, isn't it?
Yeah. That's like sounds like a cesspool of sin. And you go back to Ephesians. That happened with the disciples too.
It's
People,
true.
disciples, apostles, pretending, if I could say it, say words, pretending to be something they're not. And this same church, Smyrna, is still dealing with the same situation.
Well, the good thing with Smyrna is that they're not dealing with it internally.
Right.
They're dealing with an exposure to it from outside.
That's true. That's true.
You and I were talking before we started recording this one about the concept of being rich. And I think it is kind of cool. And I posed the question in class when we talked about it, about what does it mean
to be rich?
Really, to be rich. Well, obviously, and you said it, it's a spiritual thing, not a physical thing.
Right.
These folks didn't live with physical riches and blessings. They were destitute.
Right.
They were in poverty.
They were in trouble.
But then we look at some of the ways in which they're rich. I mean, what comes to mind for you when you talk about being spiritually rich?
Well, they were poor in possessions, but rich in God.
Right.
What's your question again? You said,
I'm just.
What does it mean to be spiritually rich?
Yeah, from your perspective, what does that mean to you?
I think it means we got people that love us.
Okay.
We got people that support and love God and resonate that feeling. What I think about when I have it down here is when you think about poor possessions, but rich in God, I go to Luke 16, verse 11.
Okay.
Luke 16:11 here basically says, "Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, basically stuff, who will commit to your trust and the true riches?" As a question.
Okay.
So I think it comes back to what's man is possessions. You know, that's the local things, the earthly things.
And what are the true riches?
But the true riches are what's going to happen to thereafter.
It's the other side.
That's like my ought thing from the last show.
Yeah.
The thereafter.
I have ought against you.
Yeah, we don't there.
I have this against you.
But it's that phraseology that what's going to happen later, that's the riches we're talking about. That's the possessions of eternal things is the riches we're talking about. But living towards that.
Yeah, when we look at spiritual riches and we think about we have Jesus on our side as our mediator. We go to God the Father in prayer and Jesus as our mediator. We have God the Father.
Right.
You hit on it. We have the family of God as a support system. Part of what comes to mind for me is just the simple fact that we aren't tortured by the things of this world, or shouldn't be as tortured by the things of this world. Like when you get involved in sinful behavior and the negative consequences and the negative effects that come with that, or the constant mental duress that comes with it.
Right.
When we're Christians, we have that relationship with Jesus.
Sure.
That relationship with God. It gives us peace.
It's open, it's honest, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, peace not being absence of physical or absence of conflict in a general sense, but it's a relationship that we have with God.
For sure.
Yeah. So very, very interesting discussion with the church at Smyrna about the various things. One of the things I like about church at Smyrna, and you've hit on this somewhere in the process.
Okay.
But the idea that each of these messages to the churches are structured similarly, but the way it's phrased is slightly different. And you hit on this one at the beginning, the words of the first and the last. You use New King James, so it's slightly different in how it's said.
What's your say?
The words of the first and the last is the way that phrase leads in. I don't remember exactly how the New King James puts it. It's slightly different, but it still uses first and last.
Yeah, it uses first and last.
Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. Right. And then it says who died and came to life. Really kind of giving us this powerful representation that Christ has the power over death.
He's back, for sure.
And, what does that mean to the folks at Smyrna?
It should show the strength of Jesus.
It does. And it shows who's going to judge us in the end and who's going to control where you spend eternity.
Right.
Well, it's not the Roman Empire, no matter what they think they can do to you.
Or any entity on earth.
Or any entity on earth.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a footnote now that I'm thinking about it. I have a footnote in chapter 5 when we look at the throne of Christ. We'll talk about it then.
Okay.
It speaks to the same basic idea of nobody has power except Jesus in the end. And to me, that wraps all the way down to the end. Be faithful in death, I'll give you the crown of life. Who's going to do that? Jesus.
Jesus, for sure.
Jesus is the one that's going to do that. Yeah. So, and I told the folks in class, we'll talk about crown of life when we get to we get over to chapter 4, throne room of God, because we see all the creatures, everybody's throwing their crowns at the throne.
But on that, he does say, "Be faithful to death, and I'll give you the crown of life." He's preparing them for what's about to happen.
Yep.
Because next he says, their testing would last 10 days, but then it's going to come to an end.
Yep.
It's like there's a time that the devil is going to do his thing, but trust me, he's not a forever entity.
That's right.
He's like,
He doesn't control it all.
No, he doesn't. He's got to ask. We've said this before. He has to, just like in the Job situation, he's got to ask for permission to scratch.
Yep.
So sorry. I'm your guy. that's where we're at.
That's a great way to put it.
So I think that's neat. It sounds threatening, but it's like, but just know this is temporary.
Yeah, and I had a note here. I mentioned to you that I don't think this even came up in class, but there is value in suffering. So none of us want to go through it.
Right.
But in life, if we allow it to be what it should be, it only makes us stronger. We have a member here that struggles with some physical issues, and I was talking to him about some of those things. And he lived most of his life without a relationship to Jesus, a true relationship to Jesus. So he's relatively new to this whole process. But he said to me, these things I deal with physically make me closer to Jesus. Just a constant reminder that my relationship with him is not about the physical in this world. I thought, man, that is powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Because most of us don't see this process of living and the suffering that we might go through through whatever it is, through physical ailments.
Right.
Because we don't see the testing that they're talking about here. We just don't get thrown in jail for being a Christian.
Right.
But it's an interesting concept that it was powerful when he said it.
Some do.
Some do.
Not in this country, but some do.
Oh, yeah. Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair statement.
Not contradicting you, just making it straight for everybody to understand is, we got it really good right here.
That's right. And
there are some that don't.
We mentioned India earlier.
Right.
There are some in this world that do deal with it. So, yeah, Church of Smyrna, a lot of positive there.
Yeah.
They're going to have their struggles, stuff they're going to deal with. Now, Pergamum.
Yeah.
You ready to move to Pergamum?
Are we jumping to Pergamum?
If you want to. Because,
let's see.
Make sure we cover what we need to cover with Smyrna.
Smyrna, just a little history here. Just throw this in here. Okay. Sorry. My wife was texting me about supper. Okay. Y'all didn't know about that. Y'all didn't even know about that. So
Spaghetti?
first city on site. No, actually hamburgers. Okay. First city on site was destroyed in 600 BC and it was rebuilt by the successor of Alexander the Great.
Oh.
Yeah. Just
had no clue.
I had to take this class in school, and so I just kept some of the stuff. It doesn't do any good spiritually, but here it is. The image of Phoenix, legendary bird that rises from the ashes from destruction, and it is applied to Smyrna. Not only the
I didn't know that.
instance of the church reflecting the history of the city, which is all set for one theme dominates the short letter, that of suffering persecution. So it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of neat. If you look at the history part, that kind of goes with it. Yeah. Kind of neat stuff.
Well, and I do think probably as much as almost any subject matter we study, the history of some of these cities,
for sure,
and maybe even where they where they are today, kind of play into it, and does make the topic more interesting,
right?
And more, I guess, interesting. Maybe not the best word, but it does enrich it. Mm-hmm. It's a richer and fuller kind of study of it all.
For sure.
Just a reminder, and we have to say it over and over again, what you're going to take away from Revelation should not be understanding what all the signs and symbols actually mean, because we're not going to understand all of that. The takeaway is this was written to a first century audience. It had meaning to them, but the ultimate goal was to remind them to be faithful no matter what they faced in this life, because that faithfulness will guarantee them a home in heaven.
Right.
And then to give us some examples through these churches of people that may have been struggling with some things.
Right.
And the admonition given to them to get it right.
Exactly.
Correct it. Mm-hmm. Smyrna wasn't one of those that had things that needed to be corrected. They were just really getting that pep talk, pep talk, because in the end they were doing the right thing.
They were right in the sweet spot.
They were right in the sweet spot.
The Lord was saying, this is here, this is going to happen, it's going to occur, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
And even and maybe the most critical point, even if it means they kill you, you'll be okay.
You still have that crown.
You still have the crown.
And that Revelation 2:10 resonates.
It does.
Love it.
It's amazing.
I use it a lot.
Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
It's the majority of an invitation of anybody. If you offer it, you need to know it's there.
And it is ultimately what we're all working towards.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
That crown of life.
Yep.
Remind ourselves we may face some torturous times in any number of ways. Might be physical.
That's true.
Could be emotional. It could be anything.
Absolutely.
And to the angel of the church in Pergamum write, the words of him who has the sharp two-edged sword. I love that. I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, yet you hold fast my name, and you did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. a reminder. I mean, where Satan's throne is, where Satan dwells. Just a throwback. I don't know much about Antipas, but I think we'll get back to this, but I think it's interesting that it says he was killed among you. So I'm guessing that they had some experience here with Christians being killed for the faith. I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. Jesus was very clear here, wasn't he? I'm going to tell you exactly what Balak did wrong.
Right.
You don't have to go back and look it up. You don't have to research it. This is what he did. So also you have some who hold the teaching of the Nicolaitans. Therefore repent. If not, I will come to you soon and war against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone with a new name written on the stone that no one knows except the one who receives it. How cool would that be? To be given the white stone with your new name that nobody knows except you.
Yeah, that would be pretty.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Pretty cool.
The church at Pergamus.
So it's known as the compromising church.
Yep.
And what they do is they compromise holiness for worldliness.
Okay.
Is kind of I think what we're looking at here.
Yeah, it's fair.
And Jesus, right in the middle of that passage, it's very similar to Ephesians. Very similar, to the Ephesians, to the church at Ephesus, because he starts by bragging on them for their trajectory of where they are.
Yeah.
But then he says, but there's this.
I have some things.
Let's work. Yeah, I got stuff you need to know about. So
yeah.
So that's where we're
what are the things? I mean, probably to your point, probably some of the things where we're getting some compromise.
It's all about compromise
with the
it's
world,
all about,
with the world around us, right?
Yeah, and don't. He's saying don't. That's the quick answer is don't.
Yeah, just stop. Just stop.
So I do got a few things on this. So we have compromise destroys achievement.
Oh.
So if you decide that you know what God wants you to do, and you do part of that,
right,
and not all of that, it's all a failure. Sorry.
No, that's a great way to put it.
There's no halfway in.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something to think about. Jesus did give accolades to the church. He did brag on them a little bit, so that needs to be understood. But and he appreciated their faithfulness, but then he had that nevertheless thing, and that's what he talked about there.
I think we have one. I should know this off the top of my head, but I think we have one church in the mix where he does not give a commendation. I'll have to we'll see it as we go through it, but I think there's one. But other than that, what was going through my mind was what you just said. I mean, he does give them some kudos, right? And that's consistent through most of these, that there's something positive to be said, and maybe that's a message for us too in how we interact with other people. Don't always just say you're doing this you shouldn't be doing. Right. Sometimes it's about saying, you're trying hard. This is something you could work on. Or maybe you say it to yourself. This is something I could work on, whatever. But but yeah, that's a great point about the compromise. I have a few things against you.
But compromise does allow worldliness.
It does, and I think about what you said about the Nicolaitan. I mean, the compromise and applying it to maybe the Nicolaitans. We've talked about it before, but just like this Balaam thing, there's this worldly practice that involves sexual immorality for them. It was big among the Greeks, incorporating that into their religious practice. So you're right. They're in a world where they're heavily influenced by the things around them, and they're allowing that to compromise.
Well, to take
the
time frame, it's compromise of the Trojan horse. I mean, you are hiding what you think is truth, but it's being presented, and you're living in a way in which it's not.
Yeah.
And so that it's the Trojan horse of worldliness. It's bringing it in.
Do we do that?
All the time.
Yeah. So
it's not a problem that's gone away. It's still a thing.
That's a challenge for us today.
And that's what I said earlier, and maybe on a different show, but about the world, how crazy it is.
Right.
I know it's always been crazy, but it just seems especially more now.
Yeah.
I guess because it's current. But
it's what we're living.
It's a different shape of things.
Yeah.
What was, and it's funny because we tell our kids, or tell kids in general when you teach teenagers, you're like, well, or I know parents will tell kids, well, in my day, and these kids, they turn it off.
Yep.
Your day was black and white, mom and dad.
Right.
Now this is different, and
Your day
different.
was knobs.
Exactly.
Knobs on the TV.
You had a tube. You don't know what this is about. But it's just, and it is in a different shape and a different fashion. But again, it's the Trojan horse. You create it in a picture that is pleasing. No matter what year it is, no matter what day it is, the devil's going to find a way to make it look good to you.
And it's interesting what you said, because the kids will do the same thing.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point where they're going to say, back in my day.
No, it'll repeat itself. They don't say it won't, but it will.
And that's but to me, when you saying that makes me think, this is exactly why we have these messages of these 7 churches, because what they were experiencing, we are going to experience,
right,
in some way, shape, or form. It may be a little bit different depending on which church you're talking about or which age we're in. But Paul, you and I live today, and we're experiencing some things that we can grow from what they experienced.
Right.
Your kids will experience it, and then your kids will tell their kids,
right,
and they can learn from it. We don't need to pretend like this book was written about something that's going to happen in the future. And it happened to them, and it happens to us.
And part of that came from it's all about the morality system.
Oh yeah,
and it tore it up. So it's mentioned about Balaam there, and if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of mention something about that. You got Numbers 25, 1-3.
Yep.
Where while Israel remained in Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab.
Yep.
For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, lowercase gods, because they said there, because they think that it's not the ultimate God. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel, as well he should. When you're joining in with a situation of sinful activities, be ready for Jesus to come in and give you a backhand.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just what it is. And in the Nicolaitans situation, there's a reminder to them that many false doctrines can creep into the churches, and doctors can come in and hated situations because these are despised by God.
And not dissimilar to Ephesus.
Exactly.
Because Paul told the elders at Ephesus,
that's true,
in his last discussion with them, beware of the false.
Right. So in our class and on this show, we've talked about, we're going to study these churches. We want you to see these churches, these congregations.
Yep.
But please understand, this is still happening today.
That's right.
There is one church, Ephesians 4.
Yep.
We can go 1-7. We can talk all about how there's one church.
Yep.
Okay? But what we find here, and what we're finding in these churches in Asia, is the same thing happening today.
That's right.
Is things are slowly creeping in that changes things, and we just don't need to be blind to it. I think what Jesus is doing here, if nothing else, he's preparing these congregations for the garbage the world's trying to bring in to make the church just like what's happening on the outside of the doors.
I'm nodding at him as if you can see me nodding.
He's with me. We're definitely together.
I need to throw some words in here.
We got the fist bump happening, but it's just one of those things.
That's exactly right.
It's it. And as much as we're talking about first century, we're also talking about 21st century.
Well, and that's the extrapolation to the whole book.
Yeah, that's
really,
true.
What we're going to find when we see the signs and symbols that so confuse everybody is that when you put them in some perspective of what Jesus was trying to communicate to them,
right?
It's not really that tricky.
Mm-hmm.
We talked just a brief bit in the class about chapter 6, where we get into the 4 horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the concept of the 4 horsemen is understanding how man, the cycle. One commentary called it the cycle of man's vanity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this over and over and over again process. There's no magical, mystical thing about 4 horses riding into some apocalypse, blah, blah, blah. I mean, really, it's just about understanding it's a representation of how man constantly enters into this cycle of sin over and over and over again. And you're so right. Really, it was relevant to them, and it continues to be relevant today because we still see the same things happening. We still see this stuff creeping into the church if we're not absolutely diligent. I will go ahead and give a little bit of praise to our eldership.
Oh, please do.
And the elderships, because I've been at this congregation since I was 12 years old, and I'm now 59. That's a long time. And I've seen elderships come and go, with the exception of one issue we had many, many years ago. I'm very proud to say that our eldership has stayed true to God's word.
Awesome.
And we have not had some of this creep in on us.
Oh, yeah.
So we got, we got a few minutes left here.
Well, their reputation precedes them.
Yes.
I've been here 4 years.
Yep.
I love it. But I would never have gone here if I didn't hear and already look into what is the Piedmont Road Church all about.
Yep.
And, you look at who has preached there. You look at who their elders are. You look at the works they're involved in. And the same is church with these congregations here. You look at them. What have they been doing? What's their reputation? What's their what do they do? And what Jesus says here in verse 16, he says, you got a choice here. You can repent or else.
Yep.
I mean, he's going to show you the sword from his mouth.
And I'm
like, what?
I know it's amazing.
I think I'm going to repent because I don't want that.
I'll take that option.
Yeah.
And in verse 17, the admonition that's over and over again in here, he who has an ear, let him hear. To me, that's the statement that goes with a sound eldership like we have.
That's right.
They are hearing it.
Yeah.
And they over and over again, they're reevaluating, they're questioning themselves and making sure that they are sound doctrinally, that they have, all of that stuff is right, the way it should be.
So I think what we find here, because of verse 17, which you just talked about, and the first and last at the beginning, is he shows no favoritism. He's bringing the same thing to every church, yet he's meeting them where they're at, what they're dealing with.
That's true.
With an encouragement afterwards.
And we've talked about it. He knows them.
He does.
And that's really one of the messages that's threaded through all of these churches. Jesus knows who they are, meaning Jesus knows who you are. Jesus knows who we are as a congregation. He's there with us all the time. And I think you may have said this on our other podcast, but we sometimes live as if we don't really recognize that he's with us all the time.
Yeah.
So we make decisions that way, but he's with us.
He absolutely is. And I'll tell you this is a neat little illustration. It's so short. It's like when you wear the white shirt on Sunday because it's Sunday. It's a Sunday shirt.
Yeah. It's your Sunday.
Never eat anything that you have to use ketchup. Because once you get ketchup on that shirt, you'll never get it off. It's a fried chicken day.
It's a fried
Don't
chicken
do
day.
things you can't undo.
Wait.
You see what I'm saying?
Is a fried chicken day a good day?
Oh, yeah. Fried chicken day is always a good day.
I was just checking.
Oh, it's always a good day. You
it's
can
not
get
a ketchup day.
But
it's
ketchup,
a free chicken.
You can't undo the ketchup on the white shirt.
Is that a new phrase for us? It's a fried chicken day?
It's a fried chicken day. I love it.
I kind of like that phrase.
We haven't had lunch yet, so.
No, that's a good point.
It's a fried chicken day.
Is that a good place to end?
I think so.
It's a fried chicken day.
I like it. Avoid that compromise, folks.
Avoid it.
For Les and for I am Paul Sperlin. This has been Coffee Conversation, Revelation Edition with Les and Paul. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for our sponsors, Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League, and you, the listener. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to being with you over that next cup of coffee.